But good morning, everyone, and a very big welcome to all of you. Today's panel is focused on how to boost lifetime value with an effective app engagement strategy. Now, I have the absolute pleasure to be joined today by two very talented women who are making waves in the mobile app world as well as their own companies by leading CRM teams and focusing on user acquisition and retention. So let's start with some quick introductions. Alexandra, Belen, if you can please share a little bit more about yourselves, your role at the company you work for, and most importantly, what got you into marketing. Alexandra, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Al. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. My name is Alexandra, and I'm working as a CRM manager at Nordeus. For those that might not know what Nordeus is a mobile gaming studio, part of Take-Two mobile games, and we are actually mostly known for our hit football management game, Top 11. On Top 11, I'm in charge of making sure that our users are engaging with our app through our communication channels, but also I am working closely with our product teams on ensuring that our players are staying in touch with our events and every fun stuff that we do within our game. And actually, your question about what got me into marketing is really interesting because I graduated from banking and insurance, and turns out I wanted to do something more fun and more interesting, and that's how I started exploring marketing and especially CRM, because it gives you really great balance between creativity and analytics, and that's something that really is good for my skill set. So yeah, that's how I got here, and hopefully some of my previous experiences can be useful to some of you today. And once again, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alexandra. Belen, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Belen. I come from Argentina. I'm currently living in Berlin. Right now, I'm the mobile tech manager for Zalando Lounge. And yeah, Zalando Lounge, for those that don't know, it's one of the products for Zalando that is offering kind of like daily curated selections of brands and campaigns, featuring fashion products and also some other kind of like home goods for prices reduced by up to 75%. And Zalando, for those that don't know, maybe if you're not from Europe, is one of the leading European online platforms for fashion and lifestyle, and connects customers, brands, and partners. So yeah, really happy for my work here as a mobile tech manager. Basically, I make sure that all of our tech integrations are there and that our CRM managers are able to create great experiences for our users. Before that, I was working as a consultant for growth at Feature, where I also was working a little bit as the product manager for one of our products. My background and how I got into marketing or CRM. So I'm actually an architect. I was working as an architect in Argentina before moving to Germany. I was also a university teacher and researcher. I think that tech was always very interesting for me, and more than marketing, I think that product is something that I really, really love. And basically, when I moved to Germany, I learned how to code and I found out about CRM, and it's this kind of like great place where a lot of things come together, tech and design and creativity, as Alexandra says. So yeah, that's how I end up here.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think the universe has conspired to bring us all together. Just to round things out from my side, I'm Elle Shuttleworth, Senior Director of Customer Success at Iterable. And just like the two of you, I never intended to get into marketing or tech initially. I actually studied law, wanted to be a barrister in the courtroom, and then decided that actually my talents were more suited to something creative and very much data-driven, which is how I got into this space. And very fortunate to be here and chatting with the two of you today. So thank you so much for joining me. But let's jump straight in. So marketing strategies, as we all know, have evolved significantly over the past few years. We did see an incremental surge in mobile usage during the pandemic in particular, with a lot of consumers just having more time to explore new apps and jump from one device to another. Now, what this has done, and it's interesting because we've chatted a lot about this over the last couple of days, but it's really given brands access to a ton of more actionable insights and led to a lot of marketers, yourselves both included, really doubling down on their app strategy and how it integrates with their entire customer journey. So To start today, I'd really love it if each of you in maybe 2 minutes or less could share a little bit more about your company's mission. You just told us who you are, but I'd love to learn a bit more about what you do and why. And then also, who is your target market and why did you or your company decide to launch a mobile app? So maybe, Alexandra, if we start with you and then pass it to Belen.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned a couple of things about Nordius, but as for our mission, we are mostly focused on what are we trying to do is to create mobile games that people will love and be excited about. And our initial idea was to create games that will be competitive, but also provide that feeling of being a champion or being the best in some area. And that's what we are doing with our hit game Top 11. And actually, simply put, we are trying to make our users happy and to provide them this unique experience of having this fantasy of leading your own club and seeing your decisions impact their gameplay. So, yeah, basically, that's what was our vision at the beginning. And as for our target market, it's correlated. So we are trying to reach football fans, sports lovers, or all around the world, and to provide this experience that I already talked about to them. So yeah, that was our vision as we were developing our games.
Yeah, and for me, well, I already talked a little bit about Zalando. Very important regarding our vision is to be the starting point of fashion and also a sustainable platform with like net positive impact for people and for the planet. In terms of Zalando Lounge, yeah, offering fashion with discounts to our users, it's kind of like making also fashion more accessible. I think that that's kind of like a big part of it, but also getting users to get into these opportunities. And for us, from the CRM side of things, basically, is also making sure that people are going to get, the recommendations or the products that they might be interested in, and that they are going to be having first steps in these discounts also is important. So yeah, definitely.
Super. And I'm really excited to dig more into that. I mean, we're talking today about how to create an effective app engagement strategy. Before I pick your brains about your app engagement strategies at your companies, as we mentioned at the start, a lot has changed in the last 2 years. So I'm curious to understand from both of you, what do you see as the defining characteristics of engagement, and how do you think that user needs and behaviors have changed in the last 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I guess maybe I can start with from my perspective. So I think that we all saw that change in engagement that happened during the global pandemic, and it was mostly reflected through changes in user behavior and also in the way the user started to satisfy their needs. And every single industry that was impacted by these changes had to adapt in their own way. And what emerged as important in that process, I think the first thing is that you need to pay attention to user feedback and what your users have to say, and take that into consideration when making your decision. And another thing that I think is important in this process is actually to rely on behavioral data that you have at your disposal and pay attention to signals that can point you that something is changing and that you maybe need to rethink your engagement strategy. So, for example, during pandemic, some users created new habits of in the ways they interact with your app. So, for example, number of session change or preferred time slot in which they interact with your app. And if that's something that's that you see that's a permanent thing, then you maybe need to rethink when you're communicating with your users and how. So yeah, I think these topics are something that will be relevant in the upcoming period as well.
Yeah, and for me, and this is very much coming from my consultant background, I guess, but it's in terms of like what is engagement and kind of like the engagement question in general. I think that the number one thing is also understanding what engagement means for your app. I don't think there is like one right answer for what engagement is or how an engaged user will look like for all of the app at the same time. So understanding the user's kind of like natural habits kind of like in relationship with your app, it's really, really important so that you can kind of like ensure that you're driven by a little bit more real data, not so much about your expectations. And regarding needs and behavior, I think that providing seamless experiences right now without losing the light is really important. In my opinion, during the 2010s, which is something very weird to say, weird, last decade, everyone wanted to have a little bit more of a flashy experience in an app. We as users probably were also looking into like cool features, being surprised. And I think that naturally we started to kind of like veer into more of this kind of like ease and this experience of ease. And again, it's going to change from company and vertical to vertical. I'm sure that in games, it's still being surprised and delighted and finding flashy things. It's amazing. But yeah, I think that all of that was pretty much accelerated by the pandemic. We had so many things calling for our attention, so many changes happening in the world, in our cities, in our work, our homes, how we communicated with our family and friends. So many things really kind of like catching our attention that created also so much uncertainty that, a turn to ease really accelerated. So yeah, I think that that's what we are seeing right now with this kind of like bigger need of personalization, right? Like not having extra stuff, just having things that really matter for your users.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Belen. I think this move from personalization to individualization is such a hot topic these days. So I guess on that topic, when we're really trying to give the user what they want, how do you hear from your users? How do you incorporate their feedback into your app strategy to make sure that their voices are being heard and that you are serving them that correct content?
Yeah, I think that being very data-driven is going to be really important. So making sure that you understand your users' behavior and that you're not being driven by what you expect those behaviors to be. And if there is a big difference in those two things, you probably need to kind of like rethink your app and rethink what you're trying to do. But yeah, I think that in that sense, like understanding your users through data is going to be super important. But also giving users some control of their experience. I think it's really interesting and important, and it's going to help you at the end of the day, and always having personalization in mind. And in terms of feedback, having feedback collection instances, right? So you can have feedback from this kind of like behavioral analysis. It's going to be kind of like a kind of feedback, right? Like how are your users using the app? But definitely you can have like more direct feedback. NPS surveys about the app, about the experience, about the features, what they want to do, what they don't want to do, and then doing something with those answers. Definitely, it's important. Yeah.
Fantastic. What about you, Alexandra?
I completely agree with you, Belen, on that one. On our end, how we are tracking the user feedback, we are actually tracking every comment or every single piece of feedback that we get through our channels from our users, and then we are trying to incorporate that info that we got from them into our decision-making process. So basically, in terms of my daily workflow, it means that I'm on a daily basis in sync with our community team as well as our user research team, and they are able to paint a really good picture about user preferences or about user sentiment in general or about some feature that we recently launched. So that really helps me to stay connected with our users and to understand what their standpoint is.
And Alexandra, when you're capturing all of this feedback and data from your users, have you changed anything about your app or your strategy in response to feedback that you've received from your customers?
Yeah, definitely, yes. What we did several times so far is that we introduced some new features to the game based on the feedback that we got from our users. Maybe the best example for that is the 3D live matches that were introduced just recently into top 11. And this feature was amongst the most requested features coming from our community. And that's how we try to listen what they have to say and try to incorporate that information into our decision what to do next with our product. So it turns out that it was a really good combo of business perspective with the user needs. So that's what we did on that front. And also for app engagement strategies, how we are collecting the additional feedback. We are doing a lot of A/B tests, and then we are trying to see which hypothesis will prove to be right, and which data will we get through A/B testing from our users, and then also try to shape our engagement strategy based on those information that we get.
Amazing. And Belen, what about you at Zalando? Have you changed anything about your app strategy or what you offer based on that feedback?
Yeah, I don't think I have a very specific example from Zalando. I can definitely take an example from my consulting days that I think it was really
that'd be great.
interesting and a great experience. So yeah, we were collaborating with a client's product team. So our engagement was with a CRM team, but in this case, the product team came to us and yeah, asked for us to collaborate in this project. And we basically, what we did was creating some custom coded in-app messages, which were surveys around an existing product feature that this team was working on. So we created these really nice custom in-app messages and ran those surveys a couple of times just to validate the responses and making sure that we were not getting kind of like a fluke of the response. And then basically in those in-apps, we were asking users to rate this existing feature and to add a comment. We got a bunch of comments. If I remember correctly, I think that around 30% of users who had rated the feature also left like a comment that was actually very actionable for us. So yeah, we provided the product team with all of this information, and this was basically kind of like really great insights around this feature that helped them validate some of their hypotheses and actually kind of like make it through some of the changes introduced to the app. So I think that in terms of like user feedback, collaborating with, between CRM and product teams, it's great, and making sure that you're not working in silos in your company and creating these instances for collaboration, I think it's kind of like a great opportunity. And yeah, you're also going to be providing a better experience for your users.
Fantastic. Switching tracks a little bit now, in terms of lifetime value, we know that a very comprehensive cross-channel experience can boost user retention. And it's something that a lot of people are talking about today, because in the last 2 years, we've seen a really big increase in user acquisition, which we talked a little bit about at the start of our panel today. But as you head into this year, and actually crazily, we're already a quarter of the way through it, which is a little bit scary at this point. So when we think about sort of the next 3 quarters, particularly in industries such as e-commerce and video gaming, where they're highly competitive, how are you approaching retention and starting to think about ensuring that users that you've just acquired will stick around and become long-term users of both of your platforms? Alexandra, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, sure. So for video gaming, it's a bit more specific in terms that how we do it actually. So first we are focusing on our game itself and the features that we have in our game, and also we are trying to provide a great user experience within the app. So that's one thing that how we are trying to ensure actually good retention of our users. And on top of that, we are trying to adjust our engagement strategies and the way we communicate to our users. So what channels do we use, and so on. And in order to do that right, we are relying a lot of on the data that we have about our users, on their preferred time slots, on their channel preferences, and we are taking all of that into consideration when shaping the overall user experience within our app. And to conclude, I think that it's really important to pay attention to the functionalities of the app and to have a good product. And on top of that, you need to pay attention also to the way how you're using your communication channels and how your strategy is shaped in order to address the needs of your users. Combining those two, you can reach your retention KPIs. I think that both aspects are equally important in this case.
Yeah, on my side, I definitely agree. I think that data is such an important kind of like base for any kind of like a strategy that you might have around retention. So yeah, quantitative, qualitative data, it's going to kind of like help you have insights on your app experience and finding areas of improvement, and then setting KPIs. I think that's a very, kind of like basic thought maybe, that sometimes it's kind of like missed how important that is. it's extremely important to set KPIs and to have an idea of really what you're going to be trying to work on in whatever period of time that you're thinking of. It could be Q1, 2, or half 1, 2. So yeah, kind of like knowing where you want to go in order to get there, I think that's extremely important. And then on the other side, and things that are really close to what I do and what I really love, it's also making sure that you have the right tech stack to kind of like help you get there, right? So having a good CRM tool, having an analytical tool also is very, very helpful, because it's going to give you more independence and kind of like understanding, first of all, what's your situation, and then kind of like as you progress with your strategy, making sure that things are going good, and if not, you can kind of like change things around. And a really good taxonomy of custom events and custom attributes that are going to facilitate A/B testing. And this is something that I think Alexandra also made a comment before in one of these answers. I think that, yeah, experimenting, having A/B testing in your mind all the time, that's going to be, I think, the basis for a right CRM approach. And it's going to contribute to this kind of like growth mindset and allowing this kind of like growth culture that it's really, really important in CRM teams. And it's going to definitely affect your engagement and, yeah, your strategy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with both of you more when it comes to testing and then leveraging the data that comes out of that testing to make incremental changes to see what impact that will have on your customer base and your retention strategy. I also love, Bella, that concept of making sure that you're looking at quantitative but also qualitative data, and having a good blend and a mix between the two, and helping that to inform your strategy. So thank you. It's probably one of my key takeaways from both of you today is that data, but it being both qualitative and quantitative. So I guess to get maybe a little bit more specific when it comes to user retention, if we know today that consumers are jumping from one device to another, how do you think about guiding them back to your app once they've left for a session or maybe not engaged in a while?
Yeah, for us, like we have different re-engagement strategies set in place, and we're mostly relying on our own channels of communication. And in this process, what I find as important, first thing is to ensure that you have consistent communication through all channels that you're using. So to provide unified customer experience on all channels. I think that's really important, especially when you're trying to get your users back to the app. Also, other thing that I would mention is that it is really important to know your users. So to know how they behaved previously, what did they like, what they did not like, and to adapt your communication according to those insights that you already have at your disposal. And of course, on top of that, additional personalization is always a good way to go. I think from my experience, it always adds some additional value and bringing that personal touch in the way you communicate with your players. So these are just a few examples about the strategies that we rely on when trying to re-engage our users.
Yeah, definitely. I think a couple of the things that you touch on there are so important, right? Like understanding your users. I think that's at the cornerstone of all of these conversations. Understanding what is the natural frequency also for your users in your app, because those kind of things are going to change a lot. Like it's going to change a lot if you look at, a social media app where you want to get users being there daily and you want their sessions to be really long, versus, for example, I don't know, a banking app where you want users to know that they can go in and out, perform a transaction, and be done with it with a lot of ease, right? So definitely understanding what is that frequency is extremely important, so that you're not too pushy and you're also not too, relaxed about your communications. You need to find that sweet spot to keep your users engaged, but not being extremely annoying. And with that in mind, yeah, cross-channel communication, and as Alexandra said, personalization, both on the recommendations or on the kind of like actual literal messaging that you're sending the users, right, the copy, but also on kind of like how relevant these messages are for each user, kind of like based on past user behavior. So personalization on both sides of things, like when and how, and also what you're serving your users. Yeah.
Amazing. And I guess just to get specific again in this topic, what are each of your recommendations for the best way to create a unified customer experience across your different channels? Maybe, Belen, if we start with you first.
Yeah, sure. I think that for this, and going back to kind of like what I really love, which is, product at the end of the day. I think that it's really good to think of CRM as an extension of your product experience. I think that's really, really important. Like, these are not two separate things. They need to be like cohesive and have this kind of like full experience on your app, right? So thinking as communications as a whole and not so much as individual messages is going to be really, really helpful. Probably being able to map all of your communications across different channels in relationship with like important milestones in your app. It's going to help you identify, for example, when maybe there might be some pain points in the product that you can help reduce from the CRM experience, like with feature education campaigns, for example, right? You know your product really, really well, but you cannot really expect your users to know it as well as you do. So I think that that's really important to kind of like look at it from the product perspective and from this kind of like cohesive experience side of things. And then, just thinking about how you can make everything feel really, natural, a natural extension. So clearly having something like a style guide doesn't hurt, and being consistent also is a really good idea. But yeah, definitely collaboration with product and design teams on these things. But yeah, thinking of the experience as a whole, I think it's going to be really important for that.
Yeah, Ben mentioned consistency. I completely agree with everything that you said. So I think that first thing that you need to ensure is that consistent message across all channels. That's really basic, and that's the first thing if you want to achieve unified customer experience across all channels. And also, it wouldn't hurt if you incorporate everything that you know about your users into that. So user preferences, I already talked about that, but it's also good to have that approach when communicating across different channels. And maybe I will now just state the obvious, but sometimes it gets forgotten. It's like brand consistency. So if you wanna, it's also gives additional value if your brand image is consistent throughout or all of your channels, and it says a really good message about your company or your app or your brand. It's really great when somebody sees some artwork that's your brand, and then easily it ties it with your app. So that's really good to be able to do.
Yeah, it's such an important point, Alexandra, that consistency of branding and messaging across the different channels. I did a session last week at the App Promotion Summit where we were talking about this on both sides. One, mapping that customer journey that you mentioned, Belen. So thinking about all of the different touch points with your customers, then overlaying that with the data points that you'll need for personalization, and then overlaying that with the different channels that you might communicate with them on at various different points in the journey. And then, Alexandra, to your point, ensuring that consistency of branding so that, hey, they might get an email from you that's pushing them through to the app. So let's make sure when they do land in the app that they're still sort of talking and weaving that same golden thread throughout the messaging. So thank you. I think another big takeaway from me today is map it and then ensure it's consistent. So with that, I know the time flew by today, as it always does, right? So I guess to wrap things up, what are you both most looking forward to this year when it comes to customer engagement? Maybe Alexandra, we start with you, and then round things out with Belen.
Yeah, we already touched about what happened during the pandemic and how user behavior changed. What I'm really eager to see is how the things will evolve in the upcoming period, like which user habits are here to stick, which user habits were temporary response, and how the user engagement will shape in the upcoming period. And also what I'm always curious to see is how the different brands will adapt and how the engagement strategies and the techniques that marketers are using will evolve and change. So I think that we can all run from others and to see what others are doing and to think about how we can adapt that to our own app and to our own users. So yeah, basically that's it.
Yeah, definitely personalization. I think it's such a huge thing in terms of like, what is happening right now, what is relevant right now for CRM, for customer engagement. Personally, also very much looking forward for collaboration between teams. I'm very much looking forward also for creating automations that are going to unlock possibilities and that are also going to unlock more time for CRM managers to work in creating like great experience for our customers. But yeah, I think number one, it's more and better personalization to kind of like create this seamless experience for our customers. That's definitely, I think, my number one objective.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Alexandra, Belen, I know this was your first virtual panel at Promotion Summit, but thank you both so much for all of the knowledge that you've shared today and your transparency around, what you're doing at both of your companies and what you're looking forward to. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think my top takeaways from today from both of you are test, right? So A/B testing has to be a really important part of any type of engagement strategy when it comes to driving lifetime value. Listen to the data and help it inform your strategies, but don't necessarily always be led by the data. So make sure that you're factoring in both qualitative and quantitative, and then testing and iterating off the back of that. But to sum it all up, maybe my one key sentence takeaway would be easy, seamless, and personalized experiences are key across all of your channels and all of your branding. So hopefully I got that all down correctly. But thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to hopefully hosting another panel with both of you in the future.
Thank you so much, Elle. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for your work moderating the panel too.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, can't wait to see how you incorporate these learnings in your own